Driver humiliated for years. Fires the company owner and reveals he was always the owner. Thomas Johnson felt tears burning his eyes as he gathered the documents scattered on the wet sidewalk. 15 years of daily humiliations seemed to weigh on his hunched shoulders as the company employees watched in silence. No one dared to help when Michael Harrison was in one of his fits of rage. It was at that moment Thomas murmured the words no one expected to hear. "Mr. Michael, you're fired." The businessman froze mid-sidewalk, still shouting orders. The employees stopped pretending they weren't watching the scene. Even the rain seemed to ease. "What did you say?" Michael turned slowly, his face red with anger. "I said you're fired and you need to leave my company now." The laugh that escaped Michael's lips echoed through the entrance of the corporate building in downtown New York City. It was a cruel laugh, full of contempt. "Your company? You've completely lost your mind, Thomas. I think 15 years of carrying my bags finally drove you crazy." Thomas wiped his dirty hands on his white driver's uniform and straightened up. For the first time in 15 years, he looked directly into the eyes of the man who had humiliated him daily. "Harrison Construction was never yours, Michael. Never." The silence that followed was broken only by the noise of traffic on Fifth Avenue. Sarah, the company's longest-serving secretary, let out a muffled gasp. She had worked there for 25 years and had never seen anything like it. Michael took a threatening step forward. "You have 30 seconds to apologize and get back in the car, or I'll call security and you'll leave here in handcuffs." "Go ahead." Thomas pulled a small golden key from his shirt pocket. "But first, you'll want to see what's in the safe on the 15th floor." The key gleamed in the fading afternoon light. Michael had never seen that key before, but he knew exactly which safe it belonged to, the one that had belonged to the company's founder, James Harrison, and which he had never been able to open since taking over the business. "How do you have that key?" Michael's voice was lower now, almost a whisper. "Because my father left it to me, along with a letter explaining everything." The world seemed to spin around Michael. James Harrison had been his mentor, almost a father to him. When the old businessman passed away 15 years ago, he left the company in Michael's hands, but always mentioned an heir who would appear at the right time. Michael had never believed the story. "You're lying. James Harrison didn't have any children. He raised me like his own son." "He did have a son, and that son is me." Thomas's words echoed through the lobby like thunder. Sarah covered her mouth with her hands, finally understanding why she had always felt something familiar about the driver. The eyes, the quiet but firm way of speaking, the tilt of his head when he was thinking, it all reminded her of James Harrison. "That's impossible." Michael shook his head repeatedly. "James would have told me. He would have told me if he had a son. He did tell you. Many times. You just never paid attention because you were too busy spending money that wasn't yours." Thomas began walking toward the elevators, still holding the golden key. The employees stepped aside, forming a silent corridor. Michael followed, trembling and confused. In the elevator, the two men rode up in silence. Michael watched Thomas's reflection in the polished metal and, for the first time, truly saw him. His upright posture, despite years of humiliation, his calloused but careful hands, his face now free of the driver's cap, revealing features Michael should have recognized long ago. "Why did you wait 15 years?" Michael asked, his voice hoarse. "Because those were my father's instructions. Work 15 years at the company, learn every department, get to know every employee. See how you would treat someone you considered beneath you." The elevator stopped on the 15th floor. The doors opened to the main office, with its large windows showcasing the view of New York City, the same office where Michael had felt like a king a decade and a half ago. Thomas walked straight to the safe embedded in the wall behind the solid wood desk. It was an old safe, with a golden lock that perfectly matched the key in his hands. "No." Michael stepped between Thomas and the safe. "I won't let you destroy everything I've built." "You didn't build anything, Michael. You just mismanaged what my father left behind." Thomas showed no hurry. He waited for Michael to process the information, watching the emotions flicker across the face of the man who had humiliated him for so long. "And if I don't let you open that safe, then you'll explain to the Johnson family lawyers why you're preventing the rightful heir from accessing his documents." It was then that Sarah entered the room, carrying a folder of documents yellowed with age. "Mr. Thomas, I've kept these papers for 15 years, just as Mr. James asked me to." Michael looked at his trusted secretary as if she were a stranger. "Sarah, what are you doing?" "Fulfilling Mr. James Harrison's final wish. He made me promise to deliver these documents when Thomas Johnson revealed himself." The folder contained certificates, old photos, and a letter sealed with red wax. Thomas took the letter with slightly trembling hands, broke the seal, and began reading aloud. "My dear son, Thomas, if you're reading this letter, it means you've completed the 15-year test I set for you. Forgive me for this trial, but it was necessary for you to know the company from the ground up, to understand the value of hard work and humility." Michael sank into the leather chair behind the desk, his face as pale as paper. Thomas continued reading. "Michael Harrison is a competent businessman, but he never learned to treat people with respect. I raised him, hoping he would change, but I fear power has corrupted his heart. You, my son, will work beside him for 15 years. If by the end of this period he hasn't learned to be a fair leader, you will take over the company." The letter went on with details about secret accounts, hidden investments, and a will filed at the courthouse that would only become valid after the 15-year test. "James always spoke of an heir," Michael murmured as if talking to himself. "I thought he was imagining things. That age was affecting his mind. My father was perfectly lucid when he wrote these instructions, and when he decided to give me a chance to prove my worth." Thomas inserted the golden key into the safe. The click of the lock echoed through the room like a gunshot. Inside the safe, along with more documents, was a small carved wooden box. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing, Michael watched silently as Thomas opened the wooden box. Inside was a gold ring with the Johnson family crest and a faded photo of a young man in military uniform. "This is my grandfather, Joseph Johnson. He founded a small construction company in 1950. By the time my father was born, the company was already growing." Thomas showed the photo to Michael, who studied it with growing attention. "My father changed his last name to Harrison when he married my mother, Mary Harrison. She was from a traditional New York City family, but the company always belonged to the Johnsons." "Why did he never tell me the truth?" Michael asked, his voice heavy with hurt. "Because he hoped you'd figure it out on your own, that one day you'd realize treating employees well was more important than quick profits." Sarah cleared her throat softly and stepped closer to the two men. "Mr. Michael, may I speak frankly?" Michael nodded, still processing the revelations. "In 15 years working here, I've seen you fire dozens of good employees over trivial reasons. I've seen whole families struggle because you delayed salaries to boost profits. And I've seen Thomas help every one of those families with his own money. What do you mean?" "You never knew, but Thomas always had access to a special account left by Mr. James, an account he used to help employees in tough times." Thomas pulled another document from the safe. It was a bank statement showing dozens of transfers over the years: hospital payments, loans for employees' children's education, rent help for struggling families. 2,300 people were helped by this account in the last 15 years, Thomas explained calmly. "My father wanted me to know every employee, to understand their needs, their struggles." Michael flipped through the statement with trembling hands. He recognized many names, employees he'd seen as just numbers on a spreadsheet. "Why did you never say anything? Why did you endure all the humiliation?" "Because it was part of the test. My father wanted to be sure I'd stay humble, even knowing I'd one day own all this." Outside, the rain had stopped, and the last rays of sunlight streamed through the office windows. Michael stood and walked to the window, watching the city bustle below. "I was a monster to you." "You were. But my father knew you would be. That's why he left clear instructions on what to do if you didn't change. Thomas pulled an official notarized document from the safe. This is the real will of James Johnson Harrison, signed in 2009 just before he passed. It states you'd have 15 years to prove you deserve to lead the company. If by then you hadn't shown fair leadership, the company would pass entirely to me. Michael read the document twice before fully grasping its meaning. Not just the company, but all properties, investments, and bank accounts. Everything he'd considered his by right actually belonged to the man he'd humiliated for 15 years. "What will you do with me?" Michael asked, his voice barely audible. "I'll offer you a choice." Thomas put the documents back in the safe and turned to face Michael directly. "You can leave now, take your personal belongings and never return. Or you can stay and learn to be the man my father believed you could be." Stay? How? By working. Truly working. Getting to know the employees, understanding the company's problems, learning to lead with humility. Michael laughed, but it was a bitter, humorless sound. "You want me to work for you? After everything?" "I want you to work for the company, for the employees, for something bigger than your own ego." Sarah watched the conversation silently, amazed by Thomas's maturity. In 15 years, she'd never seen him lose his temper or retaliate against an insult. Now she understood why. "And if I choose to leave?" "Then you leave. No severance, no benefits, nothing but what's in your personal account, which, from the financial reports, can't be much after your excessive spending these past years." The truth of the words hit Michael like a punch to the gut. He had spent nearly everything on imported cars, expensive trips, and risky investments that didn't pan out. His personal account barely had enough money left for a few months. "You planned all this, didn't you?" "I didn't plan anything. I just followed my father's instructions and observed his choices. You created this situation yourself." The phone on the desk rang, interrupting the conversation. Sarah answered and spoke quietly for a few minutes before hanging up. "Mr. Thomas, it's Mrs. Catherine. She wants to know if you'll still be home for dinner tonight." Michael looked confused at Sarah and then at Thomas. "Mrs. Catherine?" "My wife," Thomas replied simply. "We've been married for 20 years. She always knew who I really was." "Your wife always knew you owned the company." "She did. And she suffered through every humiliation you put me through, but she understood, just like I did, that it was necessary." Michael felt an even heavier weight on his shoulders. He hadn't just humiliated Thomas, he'd caused suffering to an entire family. Can I meet her, apologize?" "You can. If you choose to stay and work honestly, you'll meet many people you've hurt indirectly." The sun had fully set by the time Michael finally made his decision. He looked around the office he'd considered his for 15 years, memorizing every detail. "I'll stay, but on one condition." "What?" "I want you to teach me. Teach me how James wanted me to be." Thomas extended his hand to Michael, who shook it firmly. "Deal, but you'll start from the bottom, just like I did." "What does that mean?" "It means tomorrow morning you'll be at the warehouse helping load materials. You'll meet the employees you never bothered to greet. You'll learn how the company really works." Michael swallowed hard, but nodded in agreement. "And what will happen to the company? The business?" "The company will keep running, but with some important changes." Thomas opened one last drawer in the safe and pulled out a stapled set of documents. "This is a plan I've been working on for 5 years. Salary improvements, expanded healthcare, daycare for employees' children, professional training programs." Michael flipped through the documents, impressed by the level of detail and planning. "You really studied all this?" "I did. And I also studied business administration for the last 10 years. Night school while working as your driver during the day." "Why didn't you ever tell me about school?" "Because you never asked anything about my life. To you, I was just the driver." The words stung, but Michael knew they were true. In 15 years, he'd never shown genuine interest in Thomas as a person. Sarah knocked lightly on the door before entering. "Mr. Thomas, the night shift employees are arriving. They've heard rumors about changes in the company. Ask them to come in. It's time to explain everything." In the following minutes, the office filled with curious and worried employees. There were janitors, security guards, cleaning staff, maintenance technicians, people Michael saw every day but never truly noticed. Thomas stood at the center of the room, still wearing his white driver's uniform. Everyone, I know today has been confusing. I want to explain everything clearly and honestly. The employees listened in silence as Thomas told the whole story. The revelation of his true identity, the test left by his father, the changes to come. Mrs. Rose, a 62-year-old woman who'd worked in cleaning for 20 years, was the first to speak. Thomas, my dear, I always knew there was something special about you. The way you treated everyone with respect, how you always had a kind word. Foul be it, Mrs. Rose, you were one of the people who taught me the most these past 15 years. You and your family will always be special to me. Michael watched the interaction with growing understanding. These employees didn't just respect Thomas, they loved him like family. It was something all the money and power in the world couldn't buy. Charles, a maintenance technician, raised his hand timidly. And what about Mr. Michael? What will happen to him? Thomas looked at Michael, who stepped forward. I'm staying, and I'm going to learn how to be a real employee, starting by apologizing to each of you. The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. Michael took a deep breath and continued. I know I've been unfair to many of you. I treated good people as if they were disposable. There's no excuse for my behavior, but I hope I'll get the chance to prove I can change. Mrs. Rose walked up to Michael and placed a hand on his shoulder. Son, everyone deserves a second chance. If you're willing to learn, we're willing to teach. Michael felt his eyes fill with tears. It was the first time in years someone had treated him with genuine kindness. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. The meeting lasted another 2 hours. Thomas explained every point of the restructuring plan, listened to employee suggestions and answered all their questions. Michael stayed quiet most of the time, absorbing information about the company he thought he knew. When the employees finally dispersed, only Thomas, Michael and Sarah remained in the office. Thomas, can I ask you a personal question? Sarah said, organizing the papers on the desk. Of course, Sarah. How did you endure it? How did you keep your composure all these years? Thomas sat on the edge of the desk, a position he'd never dared to take when he was just the driver. My wife Catherine was key. She reminded me every night that everything had a greater purpose. And also, he hesitated as if deciding whether to share something deeply personal. And also what? Michael asked. My father left letters, one for each year of the test. Sarah kept them and gave them to me every birthday. Sarah nodded in confirmation. 15 letters, each with specific advice for the challenges ahead. Can you show me one of them? Michael asked hesitantly. Thomas thought for a moment before agreeing. He opened the safe again and took out a letter with a yellow envelope. This is the 10th year letter. It was the hardest for me. Michael read the letter silently, his eyes tracing each carefully written line. My dear Thomas, if you're reading this, you've reached the hardest part of the test. Michael has likely intensified his humiliations, sensing something is changing without understanding what. Remember, true strength isn't in fighting back, but in standing firm in your principles. A real leader never belittles others to feel greater. Keep being the man of integrity I raised you to be. Michael finished reading and handed the letter back with trembling hands. He knew. James knew exactly how I'd behave. My father understood people. It was a gift he had. And he still believed I could change? Thomas took another letter from the safe, this one with a green envelope. This is the final year letter. You can read it. The 15th year letter was longer and more detailed. My dear son, if you've made it this far, you've proven you have the strength of character to lead our company. Now comes the hardest part, deciding what to do with Michael. He isn't a bad man, Thomas. He's a lost man who mistook power for leadership. If he shows genuine humility and a willingness to learn, give him a chance. Some of the wisest people I've known were those who fell the hardest before finding the light. But if he refuses to change, don't hesitate to protect our company and our employees. You have my trust and my love, always." Michael finished reading silently. When he looked up, there were tears on his face. He still believed in me. After everything. He did. And I choose to believe too. Sarah glanced at the clock on the wall and cleared her throat softly. "Gentlemen, it's almost 10 at night. Perhaps we should continue this conversation tomorrow." Thomas agreed and began organizing the documents. "Michael, do you have somewhere to stay tonight?" "What do you mean?" "The apartment you were using belongs to the company. Technically, you no longer have a right to it." The reality hit Michael like a bucket of cold water. He hadn't just lost the company, he'd lost his home too. "I don't know. Maybe a hotel. You can stay in the apartment for 1 more week. Enough time to find your own place." "Thank you," Michael said, genuinely grateful for the generosity. "But tomorrow, 6 in the morning, you'll be at the warehouse. No delays." 6 in the morning? But I've never arrived early for work? Well, starting now you will. Thomas headed for the door but stopped before leaving. "Michael, one last thing. I won't tolerate even a second of you disrespecting any employee. One slip-up and our partnership ends immediately." "Understood, you can trust me." "I'll trust you, but I'll also verify." After Thomas left, Michael stood alone in the office for the first time in 15 years, knowing it was no longer his. He walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. New York City buzzed below, millions of people living their lives, fighting their own battles. For the first time, Michael wondered how many of those people he'd hurt over the years. How many employees had he fired unfairly? How many families had suffered because of his selfish decisions? The phone rang, startling him. It was his daughter, Emily. "Dad, I noticed you didn't come home. Is everything okay?" Michael hesitated. Emily had worked in the company's marketing department for 3 years. She'd have to learn the truth sooner or later. "Emily, I need to tell you something important. Can you come to the office?" "Now?" "Dad, it's almost 11 at night. It's urgent. Please." 30 minutes later, Emily arrived at the office, worried and confused. At 27, she'd inherited her father's intelligence, but thankfully, not his arrogance. "Dad, what's going on? You look different." Michael told his daughter the whole story. At first, Emily couldn't believe it. Then came anger, then sadness, and finally understanding. "Thomas was always kind to me," she said after a long silence. "I remember when I first started working here, he'd always greet me with a smile, asked how I was, if I needed anything." "And me? How did I treat you?" Emily looked at her father with sadness in her eyes. "You were almost never available to talk, always too busy, always in a hurry. Sometimes I felt closer to Thomas than to you." The words stung, but Michael knew he needed to hear them. "And now, what will you do?" "I'll support Thomas. He's the true owner of the company, and from what you've told me, he'll be a far better leader than you were." "And me? Do you forgive me?" Emily stepped closer and hugged her father. "Of course I forgive you. You're my dad, but I'll also hold you accountable to really change." "I will change, I promise." "Then prove it. Prove it to me, to Thomas, to all the employees you've hurt." Michael slept poorly that night. Not just because he'd have to wake up at 5 in the morning to get to work by 6, but because his mind was processing decades of behavior he now saw clearly as destructive. At 5:45 in the morning, Michael arrived at the company warehouse. Thomas was already there, but now he wore a simple dress shirt and jeans, no longer the driver's uniform. "Good morning, Michael. Sleep well?" "Not really, but I'm here." "Great. I want to introduce you to the warehouse team." For the next 2 hours, Michael helped load construction materials, organized inventory, and learned about delivery logistics. His muscles ached, his hands grew calloused, but for the first time in years, he felt truly useful. James, the warehouse supervisor of 12 years, watched Michael with initial suspicion that gradually gave way to curiosity. "Mr. Michael, can I talk to you?" Of course, James. And just call me Michael. Are you really going to work here with us? I am. Thomas said I need to learn the company from the ground up. And you're okay with that? Michael stopped organizing the tools and looked directly at James. James, I was a terrible boss. I treated you and all the other employees as if you were invisible. I deserve to start over. James studied Michael's face for a moment before nodding slowly. Then welcome to the team. But know this, everyone here works hard. I'm ready. Days turned into weeks. Michael rotated through every department of the company, learning each role. He worked in accounting, customer service, cleaning, maintenance. Each experience humbled and educated him at the same time. Thomas observed everything from afar, stepping in only when necessary. He had officially taken over as company president, but in a way very different from Michael's approach. Thomas knew every employee by name, knew about their families, their struggles, their dreams. A month after the revelation, there was a company-wide meeting. Thomas presented the new benefits plan, which included a 20% raise for everyone, expanded healthcare, and an on-site daycare. How will we pay for all this? Asked Richard from the finance department. Thomas smiled and showed a detailed spreadsheet. By cutting unnecessary expenses. For example, the imported company car for the president has been sold. The $15,000 a month representation apartment has been cancelled. The business trips to expensive resorts are gone. Michael, sitting at the back of the auditorium with the warehouse staff, felt his face burn with shame. All those expenses had been his. Just with these savings, Thomas continued, we have enough resources to improve all your lives and still increase company profits. Mrs. Rose raised her hand. Thomas, what's going to happen to Michael? Will he keep working here forever? That depends on him. If he proves he's truly changed, he can take on greater responsibilities again. But always as an employee, never as the owner. After the meeting, Michael approached Thomas. Can we talk in private? The two men went up to the main office. Michael noticed Thomas had made few changes to the decor, keeping the solid wood desk and bookshelves. What did you want to talk about? I want to thank you. Thank me? For what? For giving me this chance. For not humiliating me publicly like I did to you for 15 years. Thomas sat in the chair that once belonged to Michael. Michael, humiliating you wouldn't bring my father back or erase the pain of the past. Besides, my goal was never revenge. What was your goal? Justice. For the employees, for the company, for my father's memory. And do you believe I'm really changing? Thomas thought for a moment before answering. Do you want an honest answer? I do. I see effort. I see you trying. But real change takes time. Ask me again in 6 months. Michael nodded in understanding. Can I make another request? Go ahead. I want to meet your wife. I want to apologize to her in person. Why? Because she suffered from my actions as much as you did, and because I want her to see I'm trying to be a better person. Thomas studied Michael's face before responding. Sunday, lunch at our house, noon sharp. Thank you. Michael, one last thing. My wife is a very perceptive woman. If she senses you're pretending, our conversation ends right there. Understood. On Sunday, Michael arrived at Thomas's house carrying flowers and a bottle of wine. It was a simple but cozy home in a middle-class neighborhood in New York City. Katherine Johnson greeted him at the door. She was a 45-year-old woman with black hair tied in a simple bun and eyes that showed intelligence and determination. Mr. Michael, please come in. Mrs. Catherine, first of all, I want to apologize for the 15 years of suffering I caused your family. Catherine observed him carefully before answering. Michael, may I call you Michael? Of course. Michael, I won't pretend it was easy. Watching my husband come home humiliated day after day, knowing he was the true owner of the company, there were nights I cried from anger. I'm truly sorry. But I also understand you didn't know the truth. And from what Thomas tells me, you're making an effort to change. During lunch, Michael saw a completely different side of Thomas. At home, he was relaxed, affectionate with his wife, told jokes, and laughed loudly. It was hard to reconcile this image with the quiet, submissive man who had been his driver. Catherine, may I ask how you two met? In college. Thomas worked during the day and studied at night. I was his classmate. And you always knew about the company? I knew from the very first meeting. Thomas told me everything, including about the test he'd have to face. How did you endure it, knowing he was being humiliated unfairly? Catherine exchanged a glance with her husband before answering, because we believed in his father-in-law James's plan, and because we knew in the end it would all be worth it. But what if I had never changed? What if Thomas had to endure the humiliation forever? Then he would have taken over the company anyway after the 15 years. The test had a set deadline. Michael felt a chill in his stomach as he fully grasped what that meant. So, regardless of my behavior, I would have lost the company. Exactly, Thomas confirmed. The only difference is, by changing, you get the chance to remain part of it. After lunch, Catherine showed Michael a photo album from the past 15 years. There were pictures of Thomas helping struggling employees, attending co-workers' children's birthday parties, always with a quiet but genuine smile. Look at this one. Catherine pointed to a photo of Thomas carrying an employee's daughter on his shoulders. This was at the company's summer festival 5 years ago. Do you remember that party? Michael studied the photo and gradually recalled. I arrived late and left early, said employee parties were a waste of time. Thomas stayed until the end, helped set up, clean, talk to everyone. People adored him. And I never even noticed. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. As Michael was preparing to leave, Catherine called him for a private conversation in the kitchen. Michael, can I talk to you woman to man? Of course. My husband is a good man, maybe too good. If you're faking this change, if you're planning to stab him in the back, I'll know, and I won't allow it. The firmness in Catherine's voice was intimidating. I'm not faking it, I swear on everything sacred. I hope not, because if you hurt my husband again, it won't be him you'll have to face, it'll be me. Michael swallowed hard and nodded in understanding. In the following months, Michael's transformation became evident to everyone in the company. He greeted employees by name, asked about their families, offered help when someone needed it. James from the warehouse was the first to comment on the change to Thomas. Boss, Michael really is different. Yesterday he stayed late to help me with an urgent delivery. And what do you think? I think he's learning. Slowly, but he is. Mrs. Rose had a similar conversation with Thomas a few weeks later. Thomas, my son, Michael asked about my granddaughter who was sick. He even offered to pay for the doctor. And did you accept? I didn't need to, but the gesture was kind. Thomas smiled. It was working. After 6 months working in various departments, Michael was called for a private meeting with Thomas. How do you feel after these 6 months? Tired, Michael laughed, but also renewed. I've learned more about the company in these 6 months than in the last 15 years. And about yourself? I learned I was a terrible person, but also that I can be better. Thomas opened a desk drawer and pulled out a document. This is an employment contract. Operations manager. Salary fitting the position, but no special perks. Michael read the contract carefully. You're promoting me. I'm giving you responsibility. If you do well, other opportunities will come. And if I do poorly, then you go back to the warehouse. Michael signed the contract without hesitation. Thomas, can I ask you a personal question? Go ahead. Have you forgiven me? Truly. Thomas thought for a long moment before answering. Michael, forgiveness isn't something that happens overnight, especially after 15 years of humiliation. But I'm on the path to forgiving, and you're on the path to earning that forgiveness. That's enough for me. As operations manager, Michael flourished. His past experience, combined with his newfound humility, made him efficient and respected. He implemented process improvements, always listening to suggestions from frontline employees. A year after taking the new position, Michael received an unexpected call. Michael, it's Richard Foster from Foster Construction. I have an offer for you. Richard Foster was an old competitor who had always tried to hire Michael when he was company president. What kind of offer? I want you as president of my company. Salary 3 times what you make now, a brand new car, an apartment in the Upper East Side. What do you say? Michael looked around his simple office, watched the employees working on the other side of the glass partition, thought about everything he'd learned in the past year and a half. Richard, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not interested. Not interested? Michael, I'm offering everything you lost. Exactly. You're offering everything I lost. But now I know I never should have had those things in the first place. Have you lost your mind? On the contrary, I think I finally found it. Michael hung up and went to find Thomas to tell him about the offer. And you refused without even thinking twice? I did think, for about 10 seconds. Then I realized it would be the dumbest decision of my life. Why? Because here I have something money can't buy. Genuine respect, real friendships, a job that makes a difference in people's lives. Thomas smiled, the first truly broad smile Michael had seen on his face since they'd known each other. Do you know what this means? What? It means you finally understood what my father wanted you to learn. That evening, Michael dined again at Thomas and Catherine's home. This time the atmosphere was completely different. They talked like friends, laughed together, shared stories. Michael, can I tell you a secret? Catherine said as she served dessert. Of course. My father-in-law James left a letter for you too. Michael nearly dropped his spoon. What do you mean? A letter that was only to be delivered if you truly changed. Thomas, show it to him. Thomas went to a cabinet and took out a sealed envelope with Michael Harrison written in cursive. Michael opened the envelope with trembling hands and read the letter aloud. My dear Michael, if you're reading this letter, it means you found the good man I always believed was inside you. I know the test was hard, but it was necessary. You had the potential to be a great leader, but first, you needed to learn humility. I hope you now understand that true leadership isn't about power, but about service. It's not about being feared, but about being respected. It's not about taking, but about giving. If Thomas decided to give you a second chance, it's because you proved yourself worthy of it. Don't waste this opportunity. Use your experience and your new perspective to help the company and its employees grow. You have my blessing and my trust. James Johnson Harrison. Michael finished reading with tears in his eyes. He really believed in me, even after everything. He did, and so do I. Thomas extended his hand to Michael. Partners? Partners. 2 years had passed since that first revelation on the wet sidewalk. The company thrived under Thomas's leadership, but now with Michael as a true partner, not just an employee, Michael had become Thomas's right-hand man, overseeing daily operations, while Thomas focused on long-term strategy. They worked in harmony, each complementing the other's skills. Michael's daughter, Emily, had also grown professionally within the company, taking over as marketing director. She developed campaigns highlighting the company's human values, attracting both clients and talented employees. One Friday morning, Thomas called a special meeting with all employees in the company auditorium. Everyone, I have some important news to share. The auditorium was packed. Employees from every department, from janitorial to management, sat eagerly. First, I'm pleased to announce that our company has been chosen as the best workplace in New York City for the 2nd year in a row. Enthusiastic applause echoed through the room. Second, our profits have increased 40% this past year, which means each of you will receive a bonus equivalent to 2 extra paychecks. More applause, even louder. And third, Thomas paused dramatically. Michael Harrison has been promoted to company vice president. The auditorium erupted in cheers. Michael stood, clearly moved, and waved to the employees who rose to congratulate him. Mrs. Rose, now 64 but still active, was the first to speak when the applause died down. Michael, my boy, I'm so proud of how you've grown. James from the warehouse shouted from the back. Michael, you've earned it. You worked hard to get here. Michael stepped up to the microphone, visibly emotional. Everyone, I know many of you remember how I used to be. Arrogant, disrespectful, selfish. You had every right to hate me. The auditorium fell silent. But you gave me a second chance. You taught me the value of teamwork, humility, and mutual respect. You turned me into a better person. Michael paused to steady his emotions. This promotion isn't just mine. It belongs to all of us, because a company is only strong when every employee feels valued and respected. The applause returned, even warmer than before. After the meeting, Thomas and Michael walked together to the main office. How do you feel? Thomas asked. Grateful, more grateful than words can express. My father would be proud of us both. You think so? I'm sure of it. We turned a good company into an exceptional one, but more importantly, we proved people can change. Michael looked out the office window, watching the employees in the courtyard below. Some were eating lunch in the new break area they'd built. Others played with their children in the company daycare. Everyone looked happy, fulfilled. Thomas, can I tell you something? Of course. Today I'm happier as vice president of this company than I ever was as president. Why? Because now I know I deserve to be here. I worked for it. I gave it my all. I learned from my mistakes. It's not just a title handed to me by inheritance or luck. And that makes all the difference. 3 months later, the company received an unexpected visitor. Charles Miller, an investor from New York City who had tried to buy the company years earlier, showed up unannounced. Thomas, I'm here to make an offer you can't refuse. What kind of offer? I want to buy the company for $300 million. That's 3 times its market value. Thomas and Michael exchanged glances. Mr. Charles, may I ask why the sudden interest? You've built something unique here, a company with an excellent reputation, loyal employees, sustainable growth. I want to replicate this model in other cities. And the employees? What would happen to them? Well, naturally, there'd be some restructuring. We might need to cut some costs. Costs like salaries and benefits? Possibly. Thomas stood up. Mr. Charles, I appreciate the offer, but our company is not for sale. Not even for 300 million? Not even for $1 billion? Charles looked visibly irritated. You're making a mistake. Money like this doesn't come around every day. You're right, Michael said, also standing. Money like this doesn't come around every day. But neither does a company where people are truly happy. Happiness doesn't pay the bills. Our company pays the bills and still brings happiness. Why would we give that up? Charles left the office shaking his head, muttering something about crazy businessmen. Do you think we made the right choice? Michael asked. I'm absolutely certain. That afternoon, Thomas called another meeting with the employees to explain the offer and their decision to refuse it. Why did you turn it down? Asked Richard from accounting. Because $300 million can't buy 15 years of mutual trust, Thomas replied. And because you're our family, Michael added. And family isn't for sale. Mrs. Rose stood up slowly and began to clap. Gradually, the entire auditorium joined her, creating an ovation that lasted several minutes. 6 months later, something no one expected happened. Michael's daughter, Emily, announced her engagement to Gabriel, the youngest son of Thomas and Catherine, who worked in the engineering department. Dad, I know it might seem strange, Emily began to explain during a family dinner. Strange? Michael smiled. My daughter is marrying the son of the finest man I know. I couldn't be happier. And you, Thomas? Gabriel asked nervously. Gabriel, Emily is a wonderful young woman. You have my blessing. The wedding was held in the company courtyard, specially decorated for the occasion. All employees were invited, and many helped with the preparations. It was a simple celebration, but filled with love and joy. During his speech as the father of the bride, Michael became emotional as he spoke. 3 years ago, I was a lost man, obsessed with power and money. Today, I watch my daughter marry the son of the man who taught me the true meaning of success. No amount of money in the world could buy this happiness. Thomas also gave a speech. James Johnson. Harrison always said that family isn't just about blood. It's about love, respect, and mutual support. Today, our families are officially united, but in truth, we've been a family for a long time. 2 years after the wedding, Emily and Gabriel announced they were expecting their first child. The news brought even greater joy to both families and the entire company. "What will you name the baby?" Catherine asked during a Sunday lunch. "If it's a boy, James," after his grandfather, Emily replied. "And if it's a girl?" Michael asked. "Hope," Gabriel said. "Because that's what the two of you gave us. Hope that people can change, that families can come together, that love always triumphs over hatred." Michael felt his eyes fill with tears. 20 years ago, if someone had told him he'd one day be the grandfather of his driver's grandchild, he would have laughed. Now he couldn't imagine greater happiness. On the day little Hope was born, the entire company paused to celebrate. Thomas handed out chocolates to all the employees, and Michael arrived at the hospital carrying flowers and balloons. "She's perfect," Michael said, gazing at his granddaughter through the nursery window. "She is," Thomas agreed. "And she'll grow up in a world where family, respect, and love are the most important values. Thanks to you." "No, thanks to us. You've changed just as much as I have, Michael. Maybe even more." That night, alone at home, Michael wrote a letter to his newborn granddaughter. "My dearest Hope, by the time you read this letter, you'll be a young woman. I want you to know the story of how your family came to be. Your grandfather Thomas is the most honorable man I've ever known. He taught me that true strength comes from humility, that real leadership means serving others, and that family is built on love and respect, not blood. Your father Gabriel inherited these qualities. Your mother Emily taught me it's never too late to change, to apologize, to become a better person. You are the symbol of all that's possible when people choose love over hatred, forgiveness over revenge. Grow up knowing you are loved by an entire company, by an entire community that has become family. With all my love, Grandpa Michael." End of story. So what did you think of this story of transformation and redemption? Could you picture Michael truly changing after so many years of arrogance? Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe people can really change when given the right opportunity? We'd love to hear what you think about this story. Don't forget to like, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other heartwarming stories like this one.